Hello, everybody. Welcome to SCM Webinar Wednesday. My name is Martijn Lofvers. I'm the Chief Trendwatcher of Supply Chain Media. I'm also the Editor-in-Chief of Supply Chain Movement, European Quarterly Magazine, and bi-weekly newsletter, Use LinkedIn Group. And I'm also the architect and lead analyst of the SCM IT Software Map. And in the next 60 minutes, we have a live webinar. We're going to talk about AI-powered supply chain resilience with process intelligence. Welcome to all the listeners online, and also welcome to the delegates at the Celonis event in New York. So that's quite new to me to be broadcasted live. So, like I said, we have a live webinar, and with me I have two excellent experts on this topic. So you see me left without glasses, that's me. And Manik, Manik Sharma of Celonis, welcome.
Welcome, Martin. Excited to be here.
Thank you. And maybe you can briefly, introduce yourself as your function, but mainly what's your connection with AI?
Perfect. So I had the supply chain AI go-to-market with Celonis. Prior to coming to Celonis, I have worked in companies like i2, which is now Blue Yonder, Kinaxis, Lamasoft, and Palantir. So it's been 2+ decades in supply chain AI decision intelligence, which we may call it.
Okay, cool. Pushpinder Singh from IBM Consulting, welcome. Maybe you can explain briefly your function and also your connection with AI.
Thank you, Martin. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Pushpinder Singh, and I lead supply chain strategy practice at IBM. And it's great to be here to explore this topic, right? Resilience is on everyone's mind nowadays. And AI-powered supply chain resilience is really redefining how we respond to disruptions. From my own experience working with global leaders in supply chain and more recently with AI, I see AI is no longer just about generating forecasts and insights. It's more about enabling faster and smarter decision making. And that shift from insight to action, what excites me most about the future of supply chains. Again, looking forward to this conversation, and I will be sharing my perspectives and real world insights on this topic.
Okay.
Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, thank you. A few practical things. This webinar will be recorded and will be made available on YouTube within 48 hours. Also, the presentation will be made available as PDF. The audience is on mute, but you can interact with us. You see the chat functionality on the right-hand side. I won't track the chat functionality because basically people will ask, is this webinar will be recorded? Yes, it is. So the Q&A function is one down below. So if you have questions to Manik or Pushpinder, please use the Q&A functionality on the right-hand side. I will track these questions. If they are in line of the conversation I will be having, I will ask these questions immediately. If not, I will reserve the questions to the Q&A at the end. All right. And good news, right after this, there's that extra 30 minutes to sit down with me and the speakers to have some further questions or practicalities of AI. So you can meet them afterwards in the virtual lounge. As of this point, the three of us will shut off our camera. Why? Because people can then enlarge their screens and then have a better view on the presentation. All right. So getting back to Celonis, maybe Manik, can you explain a bit about the background of Celonis? What is it you're playing in this market?
Yes, so Celonis has been in the market doing process intelligence, process mining for a long time, and has customers globally. And through this process, they have been able to integrate and stitch end-to-end processes for which run an enterprise. Today, you can look at Celonis from an end-to-end enterprise intelligence layer, and intelligence to us is a semantic representation of the business where the data is connected, the processes are connected, the material flows are connected, the knowledge from interacting with doing process mining is also captured there, and the experience, people can codify their experiences as well as that semantic representation of the business. It is an AI embedded tech stack, which means from integration to the semantic representation to the workflow and orchestration, AI is embedded for things you would love to do with it to create workflows or a process. And when we talk about end to end, it becomes very important because orchestration. So you have orchestration built in with context. So if there is a disruption, Where for inventory, the person responsible for inventory could orchestrate actions through the logistics or the warehouse. So those are captured. And last but not the least, it's an enabling a new class of agentic. So once we do this, we can analyze for you the end-to-end processes and highlight where agentic makes sense. And then that is where you can codify these agents and models to then drive the new processes, which are basically drive the agentic supply chain.
Yeah. So you're coming from business process mining. So 10 years ago, we talked about robotic process automation, like, you get an email and you translate it into your order into your ERP, and that's very static. And now we get AI agent doing this kind of things, but based on dynamic environments, I would say.
It's dynamic environments and the intelligence. See, it's not pure automation. You just don't say, okay, press this button or do that.
No.
This is about the intelligence and the context of what the action needs to be.
Okay, so we'll discuss about it later in depth. And maybe you can also highlight a bit, in which markets Celonis is playing.
So Celonis is primarily playing across multiple industries. So we cater to all industries, and as reflected in these quadrants, we are the leaders in different or the different quadrants, where the key thing is how adept are we in mapping the end-to-end processes across multiple industries, and these three quadrants speak to that, where we have the leadership on understanding these industries.
But it's good to highlight there are no overviews on decision intelligence in supply chain yet. So you see the Gartner quadrant, but there are no similar overviews of vendors yet, I think.
Yeah, and I think things are changing. The whole agentic world is going to redefine some of these,
Mhm.
and they will come closer because now everybody is a platform, everybody does AI. So it will be how well you can execute, and that is where things will start converging again.
Yeah, and we'll talk about it later more and more. All right, Pushpinder Singh, maybe you can highlight a bit, about IBM. IBM is big, but maybe you can speak for IBM Consulting and your own supply chain practice.
Sure, Martin. Yeah, at IBM, we believe transformation is not just about technology, like it's about outcomes. And we empower organizations through three powerful engines. It's IBM infrastructure, where we build for resilience and mission critical performance, where our products like Z systems, power servers, and storage are backbone for many industries from many, many decades now, like banking, airlines, etc., where downtime is simply not an option. So we play a big role in that space. In terms of our software, like which is primarily fueled by data, automation, and AI, to unlock scale and trust, right? With our software like Watson X and Red Hat OpenShift, we help organization harness the value of AI and data, automate at scale, and also embed security and trustworthy AI into their operations. Finally, with IBM Consulting, which I represent, focuses on business impact, right? And we combine industry and domain expertise with technology execution to deliver measurable outcomes. Together, these three engines, like strengthened by our partners and clients, help organization imagine how we operate, innovate, and lead supply chains in various industries, right? And we all know, like today's supply chains are under constant stress. Data volumes are exploding, disruptions are the norms, and overall the pressure to deliver more with less is kind of increasing, and most companies are struggling to keep pace with it. And that's where IBM makes the difference, like with our 100 plus years of leadership in infrastructure space, with our leadership in enterprise software, and 30 plus years of consulting experience. Now we infuse it with AI and data, and we bring unmatched depth to solve business problems that matter most for our clients, right? What makes IBM unique is that these three engines don't just stand alone, right? They work together. And by uniting this, we enable supply chains that are adaptive, intelligent, and resilient. Also, we have our own infrastructure business, which gives us first-hand experience managing the world complexity in terms of supply chains, and the learnings which we get from our infrastructure business supply chain. We also use our software and consulting business to turn that experience into solutions that create measurable business impact. And we, of course, co-innovate with partners and clients like Celonis, right? And just to give you a point on AI, like uh, AI has already enabled us to unlock over $3 billion in last 2 years in terms of cost savings. Uh, and this is a proof point that what is possible with AI, and we've achieved that in last 2 years time. And again, these are not just our claims. Industry recognizes us, like Forbes, IDC, HFS, Everest consistently recognize IBM as global leader in AI data and supply chain innovation. So again, in summary, like, we just don't talk transformation, we live it, we build it, and we deliver it together with our clients and customers.
Yeah. It's
Back to you,
interesting to
Martin.
see. Yeah, it's interesting to see that IBM has its own supply chain with all kind of manufacturing locations all around the world with their own sort of supply chain networks and suppliers. So you can apply your supply chain consulting within your own company. All right. Um, so to kick off, the world is very turbulent. We see all kind of things happening, and this overview reflects what CEOs are talking about in their quarterly earning calls. So this is an overview of transcripts of words of quarterly earning calls of Fortune 500 companies in the US, large companies. So basically what you see in the upper right, that what's most mentioned in these calls, and it's not a surprise. In Q1, the phrase tariff was used the most, and by CEOs. And highlighted in yellow, you see a lot of things about AI, DeepSeek. There was a DeepSeek moment earlier this year, agentic AI, and still supply chain is there on the right. Sustainability is sliding away. So this is what CEOs are talking about. Manik, if you look at this slide, so what is your take if you look at this?
No, this is how we are seeing it as well. So where I would call tariff and a Red Sea event are events which will happen, but infrastructurally, what you show in yellow is important to be very aware of what is happening in the world of AI and agentic. And what is very interesting is obviously sustainability will always be a priority with where we are headed, but supply chain still continues to be on the right because AI is not just about a chatbot. It is not just about an experience on a chatbot. It has to be core to the supply chain, where AI is able to navigate the supply chain and its complexity and be able to drive more visibility, more analytics, more root causing, and then drive superior action. So that is the reason I see things can move from left to right, but supply chain continues to be there because that is the context for AI as we drive the new processes.
All right. Pushpinder, what is your take on this?
Yeah. So Martin, when you look at this data, few things stand out, right? First is resilience and uncertainty remains, I think, front of mind for CEOs. And also supply chain leader knows, like, they need new workflows as well as systems that can adapt quickly to shocks and not just recover from the ones like which Manik just mentioned. Second, AI continues to dominate the conversation from last few years now. But this shift is important because we see a clear movement from AI being used as a prediction tool to prescriptive and agentic. And we see that CEOs are talking that agentic AI is just not kind of giving insights, but takes action. And things like rerouting shipments, adjusting inventory, negotiating supplier terms are some of the cases where we see it has a great potential, right? And finally, I will look at like quantum computing as again an emerging trend, and it's being capturing attention for many supply chain leaders, especially with its potential in optimization problems like network design or scheduling or even scenario planning. So I see that these signals show us that CEO agenda is moving more towards intelligent, proactive, and resilient supply chains now.
So if you look at the last quarter, the data of this same framework, you see especially trade policy, still tariffs are there, supply chain is getting bigger, agentic AI is moving to the right. So Manik, is it also something on your top of your mind with the tariffs, the turmoil, that things are changing and companies should act?
Absolutely. I think it ties very well to what we just talked. You see, the foundational thing, AI, agentic AI, will start moving to the right, supply chain will go, because that is the core foundation on which organizations should be looking at technology for. And then these big bubbles of trade policy, tariffs will come and pop or change. But this muscle, which is shown as part of AI supply chain, will become an important muscle which organizations have to build to be basically relevant or competitive in this space.
Pushpinder, when you talk with your clients, CEOs or COOs or chief supply chain officers, are they also aware of these topics, or have they a different kind of vocabulary?
Yeah. No, I think I see here like these conversations are shifting quarter to quarter in interesting ways, right? Again, in our conversation, uncertainty is still high, and like what's emerging is sharp focus towards reshoring and nearshoring is also kind of resonating or in conversations with many of my clients. Like leaders are rethinking about global supply chains, not just as cost lever, but for resilience and risk diversification, right? And what stands out in that companies are beginning to pair resilience with localization strategies, right? Using AI and automation to make supply chains more regionalized and as well as agile, right? And this step is beyond simple reacting to disruptions. Like it's about restructuring, redesigning supply chains for the future so that they can respond better to disruptions in future.
Yeah. And I hear also with conversations with supply chain executives, they talk about bonded warehouses in Canada for US market and that kind of stuff. So they get deeper into supply chain topics, how to redesign your network. Moving on, I think this is a slide I've been using since 2020. Basically, it highlights different kind of black swans, the yellow ones. Of course, we've seen COVID-19 popping up out of nowhere in 2020, leading to lockdowns, shortages, fuel prices going up, leading to more inflation, and of course, in supply chain, we know all the bullwhip. So that's a major important things, and we see the war in Ukraine in 2021, Gaza in 2 years ago, and Trump with all kind of unexpected tariff announcement. So what I see here is that might lead to stagflation, and stagflation is high inflation and limited growth. So Manik, what do you see in this? Because we know cause and effect in supply chain, maybe more than the CEOs knows. But what is your take if you look at this overview?
Now, I think this slide basically puts to light what we just have been discussing, right? So these black swan events or any of these things almost put a lot of pressure on enterprises to do, and obviously organizations have aspirations to grow, and everything is in this circumstance as well. And what that means is organizations have to become very responsive and very nimble to basically react to it. Plus, they have to have that resilience which we talk about to doing that. And what we discussed in the previous slide is the approach to basically now driving a good end-to-end. You talked about the root causing and being responsive to it lies with leveraging whatever investments been made in technology and overlaying AI, agentic AI, and the core foundations of supply chain all connected through this end-to-end to basically navigate this turmoil.
So Pushpinder, I think looking at all these elements and the elements in the previous slides, we have to connect the dots. So what is the root cause and what is affecting what? So how do you look at this? Is this already in place that you have this kind of overview? What could be the impact of a certain disruption?
Yeah. I think this visual really captures how fragile global supply chains are, right? And like Manik mentioned, disruptions like COVID, war, Red Sea crisis, they create a ripple effect that cascades across industries. So this captures it very well. What it also shows that supply chains are not linear, like they are interdependent and systems where shock multiplies, right? And as you are asking, like end-to-end visibility is still a major challenge. And if I remember, like based on some of our IBV study, uh, still like 90% global supply chains faces at least one supplier related disruption. So it's the impact is huge, right? And generally companies are reacting instead of proactive when such events happen. So now what makes this situation even more complex is that we have heavy reliance on few choke points in the global supply chains. Like if you look at semiconductor supply chain, Taiwan Strait, or if you look at energy and trade routes, like Red Sea becomes a big choke point for supply chains, and a very simple or small disruptions can really paralyze the flows here, right? The lessons here is very, very clear. Like resilience cannot be built by focusing only on cost efficiency. Like it really requires end-to-end visibility. It also requires like diversification and an ability so that we can adapt in real time with more digital twins, so that we can simulate the impact of these disruptions before we really make these decisions for our supply chain.
We did a survey last year among 81 senior supply chain executives in Europe. We asking them, we have been talking a lot about business transformation, but what are the drivers? So as you see here, most of the answers are highlighted here is a change of business strategy, but also the driver for excellence and continuous improvement is also mentioned quite a lot. So Manik, if you look at this, so what do you think are the most important drivers for this transformation, and how does it relate to AI?
Correct. So if you think so when you see these disruptions happening so frequently, when you see these big decisions on trade, geopolitical situation the way it is no longer those days where you could create a network design or an inventory optimization strategy once a year or once a quarter. This has almost become the new normal, where now, based on how things are changing dynamically, these types of strategy changes to adapt to it, to get ahead of it, need to happen. And that, from a technology standpoint, means our ability to consume data, make it more data driven versus model driven. So which means I'm able to now look at all the structured, unstructured data which I am subject to, bring it in the context so that I can run this network strategy, network redesign models more frequently, or my inventory strategy models, or my models for allocation run more frequently than they were used to, so that I can manage these disruptions as they come and be more responsive.
So Pushpinder, I can imagine that you have a lot of conversation with your clients about supply chain transformation. So what do you see as the most mentioned drivers?
Yeah, so I think what I like on this chart is like business strategy is by far the top driver, and that resonate well, as Manik also mentioned, right? And and again, like we all know from last few years, supply chain has moved from a back office function to a more front and center theme,
Mhm.
right? But what's surprising for me is that how low financial risk ranked in this survey, right? Because traditionally cost savings and ROI have been the number one reason to launch a transformation program, right? And what this shows is that like there is a clear mind shift there. Like companies are now framing transformation not just around cost, which is a good thing, but still, right, when I look at it, financial results still remain critical in my views, and without clear ROI, transformations cannot be sustained, right? For example, like as I mentioned before, when at IBM we see these two as kind of inseparable, right? Strategy sets the ambition, and financial outcome validate and help us scale that, right? So I would have wished to see financial result getting more priority on this chart.
Okay, so moving on, we also ask the executives, what are the main goals for this kind of business transformation or supply chain transformation? So you see it right here. So increased resilience and agility is top number one. So that's in line what we have discussed earlier. So they do recognize it. Manik, if you look at the other answers from the executives, what is remarkable in your opinion?
Yeah, so I think your next question was good, because what we just talked on the previous slide is right here. So increased resilience and supply chain cost reductions are top. But I think this whole workforce development and the building of the ecosystem, I think with how AI and agentic is picking up, people are having a lot of discussions on what the new workforce looks like, right? We talk about embed and adopt to AI. So embed and adopt to AI also requires skills to be changed. And when you put agentic in, the processes are changing, and hence people may be doing things differently. So I think those also are things which we have to pay a lot of attention to as we talk about it. and ERP upgrade in the cloud and all these. Like ERP is a great system of records, but to get to how the new world is changing, a lot of capabilities have to happen on north of it, which I think is a good depiction of how it is right now.
Yeah. Pushpinder, what do you see here, happening as main goals for supply chain transformation?
Yeah, I'll say first one is for sure like resilience and agility focus, right? So that's still a big goal because companies still are trying to figure out how soon they can have capability to respond to these type of events like disruptions, right? Now, the other point which I am seeing more in my conversations is around we are seeing a kind of structural shift where supply chains aren't just thinking about moving products, like they are thinking about also enabling new revenue models like as a service type of offering, or things more personalization at scale, or circular economy loops, right? Now this demands supply chain that are not only efficient but also flexible to support subscription models. So I see that third point which is highlighted here also will be an important lever for such type of transformation programs in future.
So, and the last 5 to 10, 15 years, there was a lot about talking about sales and operations planning, S&OP. So is it still remain the case, or see we a different kind of frequency of making decisions, Manik?
Yeah, SNOP is relevant. In my mind, SNOP was, we put a process context to it, but SNOP is still relevant. But the first bullet, increased resiliency and agility, is important. So which means now SNOP cycles are no longer the once you do a month, but has to happen more frequently. But then people who are doing SNOP realize the limitations of the systems today of how can you define, and that is where AI comes handy. How do you drive AI, and with the mix of agents, can you accelerate these processes becomes important. And it connects very well to how, if SNOP is happening so quickly, and then you can talk about SNOE and the execution having, so the workforce development ties to it as to how people start adapting to this rapid things, and how their day in a life changes to actually make that happen.
So Pushpinder, are you still advising on S&OP and this decision-making process?
Yeah, no, I think that's still by far a big process which companies are trying to stabilize. Companies who have stabilized it, they are adding more decision points into these meetings. But what a shift we see is that we do have regular cadence meetings which are happening, but still more a continuous nature has happened, like where on demand basis executives are making decisions, and they don't entertain the fact that certain decisions needs to wait for cadence monthly type of cycle on that. So see a big kind of movement towards that. A lot of companies from last few years are also kind of defining sales and operation planning execution as a cadence also. So yes, things are moving away from monthly to more frequent cycles or ad hoc cycles.
So build on that, Pushpinder, what about creating scenarios and running scenarios? Do you see companies using scenarios more often for this kind of decision-making process?
Yeah. So I'll say, like, I am in supply chain from last 25 years now, and scenarios are always very important for decision making. But the way I see in organizations, still they are not part and parcel of all the SNOP meetings. So although companies have capabilities around that, but still in terms of like making scenarios as habit is still missing or is not widely adopted. So that's an area which will improve by adding AI into play, and that's an area which will definitely help supply chains make better decisions.
So Manik, you have been to, you've been working at several supply chain software vendors in this space. So what about scenarios? Is it already applied and useful and available in these kind of applications? So has this changed in the last years?
Scenarios, I think, is a foundational to people driving an informed decision, right? Like no longer are, like we got to just rely on the output of the product which comes out. So people would like to hedge their bets and test different theories before they commit to it. So scenarios is always there. As regarding the technology landscape, different tools have different capabilities to do that scenarios. And a much more evangelist workflow would be that what was a prescriptive way of doing supply chains earlier has to become more probabilistic, where multiple scenarios are run for executives and decision makers to hedge bets on, where they can create those bands in which different strategies apply. And as soon as the SNOE comes back saying some of these things are off limit, new strategies will trigger in. So yes, absolutely relevant, but the sophistication varies from technology to technology.
Yeah, right. So talking about technology, so I also asked these executives, what are you thinking are the most important tools in AI for supply chain? So these are the answers. So end-to-end control towers was number one, but in my opinion, end-to-end control towers was mainly, from 5 to 10 years ago, look around and looking back what's happening and not so much looking forward. But in a blue box, you see all kind of AI related tools. So these are the ones most mentioned. So AI in production and supply planning is number two. Manik, if you look at this, is it surprising this result? And what do you think?
No, I'm not too surprised. Control towers is a very loosely told term today in the industry, and there can be multiple control towers, one control tower. But I want to impress upon everybody, control towers should not be created like dashboards. Control towers should be driven with more actions and insights into it, so that people are able to drive decisions out of it. It should, most times people mistake it with some glorified dashboards,
Hmm.
while as we think about control towers as almost like places from where actions can be driven. Now, what is good is the box you highlighted, and all this now production planning, supply planning, the science of supply chain has existed for a long time. But you could call that era as a model driven era, where these models of supply planning and forecasting or its production planning were created, and data was an afterthought and hence had to be contained to a very structured data model. We are into the world where these things have to be pivoted into a data driven supply chain, which means as things change with my data or as external causes change, can I formulate the right models to basically run the answer? And that is where the other thing, which is the digital twin, which you're talking about, again, another very loosely told term, but we call this semantic layer, which is basically semantic representation of the business and its ecosystem, is very important. Again, predictive AI, yes, absolutely. It's not only in operations and maintenance, even in the augmenting what supply chain do is very important. I am not too convinced. People talk about AI and chatbots. Chatbot is not AI. When you talk about enterprise system, it's just a means to converse or basically get answers, but you got to look at AI beyond the chatbots as well.
Yeah. Maybe, and especially last year, people we're seeing that a chatbot or a Gen AI tool is like on the left hand side is like a virtual assistant highlighting some data and giving you some answers. So that's what I think supply chain executives in this survey has mentioned and answered. So Pushpinder, what is your take if you look at this?
Yeah, I'll say, as Manik mentioned, most of them are really relevant for business. But if I look at, based on my interaction with organizations who have invested heavily on technology as process improvement, still I say that there is a focus of re-energizing control towers into more Gen AI and chatbot assistant driven. And the reason being is the data points have increased by using different partner system data. So I see that like a lot of effort is going in that space. uh, I will also say digital twin is also very important. I agree with Manik, like there could be maybe 5 or 10 definitions of digital twin, but still it gives us lever to simulate disruptions, like test scenarios, see the impact of decisions, right, as I say, before we make them, right? So that's a very relevant capability if companies are thinking to build resilience in their supply chain. uh, I will try to use that any other option here. Like in my views, uh, I would put agentic AI in that box, right? Because we are just at the beginning of seeing what agents can do for us. And the idea of agent, like as I said, negotiating, rerouting shipments, balancing inventory, is too powerful to ignore, right? So if we kind of bundle these agents along with chatbots, with data what we already have on control towers, we are looking at a powerful combination. So in my views, again, in summary, Gen AI powered control towers is what I'll say, digital twin and agentic AI, and together they are not just tools. Like they will really transform our supply chains into intelligent, self-healing, or autonomous systems very soon.
Yeah. We got a question from the audience. Where is Celonis positions among these AI tools? And maybe in the next slide. So this is my representation of the ideal digital supply chain twin, where you see possibly in real time all kind of flows and all kind of disruptions, mentioning what is happening in the world, how to respond, and maybe a chatbot will give you answers. What this will mean for your P&L and what should you do. But Manik, is this getting back to the question, where is Celonis positioned among these AI tools? Maybe you can answer that, maybe using this slide.
Yeah, I think this slide, I will just take it from a represent very much like what is the scope of these things. So yeah, the scope is end to end logistics, supply chain, production, everything.
Hmm.
uh, Celonis is leading the charge on driving as an enterprise platform for organization to get agentic. What we are going with is helping organizations, because when you talk about agents and we all talk about AI and context and all that, in an enterprise, what are the two contexts which anything has to have? Is one, the material flow, which is the physics of supply chain. These are my constraints, these are my routes, these are right. So that is one context, and the other is the process of how things happen between one organization of the enterprise to the other, and all the how the paper trail happens, how the customs approvals happen, those things. And these both have to come into context to come to a meaningful outcome. And with Celonis, one is able to create, I would not use the word, we call the semantic representation of the business, where now what you see on this top is all connected from the front end. You can see, and the back end is stitched together regardless of your ERP system, your warehouse system, your freight forwarders, EDI signals, and all that. And now this chat bot is able to handle no longer for static dashboards. You can ask a question and the system can now translate through whatever has been stitched in the background to provide you those answers.
So basically, what you see now, you can actually double click in all these
Yes,
disruptions and these flows and get some
yes,
insights. Yeah.
yes. You could click on a plant and see what the APO plan out of it is. You could click on an arrow and see what the P44 response is on the things which are moving. You could click on the reds, which are basically telling you where the exceptions are, where things are going late, and then right click and see what the customer impact is. So everything has been stitched, regardless of it sitting in a Salesforce system, an SAP APO system, or in a scheduling or a spreadsheet which is being used in the plant.
So Pushpinder, do you get this request from, I want this kind of digital supply chain twins?
Yeah, definitely. Like this is a request from last many years now, right? And I see like a lot of advancement has happened. As Manik mentioned, you have uh, um, data synthesize. You can do a lot of double clicks on this to get into the root causes of this, and a lot of technology solution enables that. But I'll say that like this is a great slide which captures, right, what and how a digital supply chain looks like, right? And at IBM, I'll take an example. Like we, for our business, like infrastructure business, we have built a similar platform couple of years back, right? Where we are using Watson to help take some of these decisions, right? And again, our supply chain is complex. We work across 170 plus countries with complex product line as well. And now, like what we are doing on top of that from last few years with the advent of Gen AI as well as agentic AI is that we are layering agents on top of this data, which Manik mentioned, right? And like imagine a scenario where like an agent is not only alerting you that a disruption has happened on a port, and it also says that like what type of shipment needs to be rerouted and where you have inventory to take care of that, right? So once you get that type of insights, decision making becomes more easier for business users to make, right? And that's the future. I'll say from last few years we are enabling, where we talk about resiliency, intelligent supply chains that don't just react to disruption but anticipate, and we orchestrate around that. So that's a big play we are into from few years now.
So, I'm also close in contact with Gartner, and they publish every year their supply chain strategy hype cycle. You probably have seen it. So from move from left to right, something new is popping up, and then it's being hyped by the media and by the analysts, etc. And then you get some disillusionment, and then you get to the trough of disillusionment. Things have failed and haven't been productive as promised, and then you get a slope of enlightenment, and then you get to the productivity phase. I highlighted four phrases here: digital twin of customer to the left, digital supply chain twin, supply chain resilience, and supply chain risk management. And my take on this is, these phrases are all spread, but I think they are all interconnected. So I think companies who are busy with all this, they don't see this as separate phrases. I think they see this as connected one. You should embrace. So my opinion is, it's remarkable that these phrases are so spread out. Manik, if you look at this, is it all spread out like this, or is it more getting to the right, in your opinion?
I think it is getting the right, because like with the way the world has changed in the last 1 year with AI, with the way things are happening in the geopolitical world, and how supply chains have to be again redesigned with because of the geopolitical things. All this is getting accelerated, and that is leading to a very strong business case of what is the AI driven decisioning or AI driven supply chain about. So while these may be relevant, I think they're collapsing significantly because of the need today.
Okay. And Pushpinder, if you look at this, what's your take on this? Is it still relevant or accurate at this moment, or is it also changing rapidly? This is from last year.
Yeah, I'll say this is still a good document to understand how the type of hype cycles are happening. But in
Mhm.
my views, right, if I look at the ones which were highlighted, artificial intelligence, Gen AI, digital twins, and all, right, I see that the way it's mentioned, 5 to 10 years or even 10 plus years, look more slow to me, right? In my
Mhm.
experience, I believe these will become part much sooner, right? And the reason is we have seen in last 12 months that technology adoption is accelerating dramatically, right? With the advent of just generative AI, like within 12 to 18 months, we see widespread adoption in day-to-day life as well as business processes. And we are seeing like digital twin are not as a futuristic pilot. Like many companies have enabled them on different type of ISVs. They are enabling them by using IoT based devices so that they can get more sense of what is happening at a more second or minute level on the shop floor. So I think a lot is already happening, so these will accelerate. And things are not really experimental when we talk about AI. Of course, agentic is new, but still for traditional AI as well as Gen AI, things are in operations, right? And a lot of convergence of technology is happening here. So I'll see that things will expedite here.
Okay. So, talking about technology, so we have all seen in the last 20, 30 years that there's a lot of implementation of ERP. So, there are some companies embracing full ERP suites on the left side, or what you have also seen on the right side, companies are choosing for more best of breed. So they have the system of record in one ERP environment, and on top of that, they have their system of differentiation with all kind of tools. Manik, you have been coming from different vendors in the past. So what's your take? So what do you see happening? And moving into the space of AI and decision intelligence, is it applicable to both environments?
Yes, absolutely. So what you've captured is absolutely like how you'll see customers' footprints in the last 2 decades of like when the first lines of code of supply chain were written in a company called I2 to where it is today. You will see different companies where this whole supply chain planning ERP is all bundled together and they've subscribed to it and they've invested in it significantly. In the other cases, well, companies have a very robust ERP or multiple ERPs. They have gone with the best of breed approach. And these investments are all valid because these can do things what they can give you the answer, they can create a plan and all that. But the need for today, which we have all talked about, is how do I stitch and become end to end is important. And second, how do I become responsive? So we should, I think, at this on this slide, we should just acknowledge that this is the landscape. These are investments made. No longer is the discussion about, oh, how to rip and replace the whole thing. Yes, there are components you could do. But to become AI, how do I leverage what I have and take it to the next level are things we should be discussing and talking about.
So maybe that's a good introduction for this slide. So I created in June a company IT portfolio for supply chain end to end. So that could be from supplier relationship management on the left to customer relationship management on the right, and you see down below your ERP, your system of record. What's more important, you see in the middle a whole stack of all kind of supply chain related applications: WMS, TMS, MES, yard management, APS, you name it, it's all there. But the most important thing, what I've seen changing in the last few years, is that the more advanced companies are implementing a data layer on top of their ERP environment to make sure that they're more flexible. They don't bolt on the other applications for planning hardcore on their ERP. No, they use an ERP layer, a data layer on top of that. And now you see, and that's your field, Manik, decision intelligence coming in. You're coming from the process mining on top with analytics, but now you see decision intelligence platforms popping up, and maybe that explains better how we see the things evolving if you're coming for your ERP full suite environment or a best of breed. So I think this is reflecting more in what you're saying, that the companies should be aware, okay, what do I need to apply AI, and where could I use it in different kind of applications, and where can I get the data from?
Absolutely. Like, I think what I would impress upon is like with what we see at the customers, right? It is, these are lots and lots of money and time, basically investments company have made and have got comfortable with the answers these smaller multicolored boxes provide. But then the need of today is how do I become smart to look at end to end and see things connected is what is being depicted here as the business process mining is basically bringing things together. But then what is the intelligence? So how do I create that semantic representation which is able to stitch things together? This is not a data lake. I want to be very clear. Data lake is putting things into a one consolidated system,
Mm-hmm.
but context is very important. Context, much like how you could see a Google Maps where there is a static map on which there is a GPS car moving, and the context of a traffic is connected to the position of you on the map. That is what we call a context. Similarly, in a supply chain, if I have a disruption, the context of the disruption to where it is happening, what parts are getting impacted, what resources are getting important is important. And that comes through the new generation of tools which are AI powered. Because why AI? Because AI is able to translate these systems, because these systems don't talk a common language and they don't talk a same aggregation. So you use AI to bring this puzzle together, stitch it together to create this representation end to end, on which now you can now simulate your end to end business analytics, your end to end decision making, your end to end AI agents. So those are things will happen through this layer.
So Pushpinder, do you have the conversations with your clients to map out the IT portfolio, the current one and the preferred one for the future?
Yeah, that's an important topic, like being discussed many times. And I see this chart as a very comprehensive chart highlighting all the relevant technology is there. But in my views, when I look at it, right, I feel business intelligence and analytics is the place where real value to business users comes live, right? And historically, just assessing insights meant like waiting for an IT report to be created or navigating through series of dashboards. But today, with the new technology, what we are seeing is that things are advancing, and we have a change in a model. Like the key change is that now we have potential that a business leader can simply ask a question: what is my forecast accuracy in Europe for this quarter, or what are my biggest supplier risks today, or and getting an instant answer which is very contextual with some type of recommendation, right? This is the power what we are seeing companies enabling for their users. And what it does is that it democratizes the analytics. It also put intelligence in the hand of decision makers, right? And it reduces the dependency on specialist function, so things can be more done by people who are not in their roles for many years. And that's the reality now. Average time for any function is reducing in the business, right? And at IBM, like, we are embedding this capability into supply chain systems from last few years, so that data is not just visible as a part of this layer, it is actionable, it is conversational, and available to everyone who needs it in real time, right? Now we are also, as I mentioned before, extending this with agents, so that these actions can be performed by group of agents, and further productivity can be increased for the planners or the users who are making these decisions in real time.
Yeah, and maybe Manik, you can explain a bit the setup of Celonis from the different kind of views of users.
Yeah, I think that also addresses some of the questions in the chat. So let me walk through this. This is a conceptual slide which will help us address that answer. So if you look at Celonis as a platform, right, we'll start from bottom going up. So at the bottom, we have all these data systems, can be data lakes, ERP systems, spreadsheets, your supplier contracts, structured, unstructured data, which is within the four walls of your organization, is the left bottom box, which we will connect to, and it's a bidirectional arrow, and we'll come to that later. But then we also pull up all the external data which the enterprise may think is relevant. Could be weather data, could be tariffs data, could be other risk data which comes in. And that gets pulled into a data core, and this data core is where all this data sits based on what type it is. And then our IP to bring this data, contextualize it into the intelligence graph is what we want to highlight. So we take this data, we curate it, we basically now start stitching it to create that graph of connected nodes and arcs, basically, which you can think of as the map you saw in the other slide, but a lot of things underneath it, right? Then with process mining, we build the knowledge of how things have been happening within the nodes and at the edges, which could be represented as playbooks or can also be analyzed as where there are problems happening, the trends, or what are my biggest problems in this transportation. So those are things which come in, and the experience. In this box, you will also see models. So intelligence is not just a data collection activity, it is also the behavior. So when I have something, how much supply can I generate? So these models are typically your planning, scheduling, or data science models, which define the physics or kinetics of how things move within your supply chain. So the intelligence graph is a live representation as a graph of your network, the nodes and arcs and the details underneath it. It also has the models connected, whether it is, you saw those small boxes which are in the previous slide, whichever is relevant is connected here. So when you connect all this, you are now seeing a live representation, a true digital representation of the business. And then it comes to when exceptions happen and all that, you're able to get to the root causes and all, but the orchestration engine helps you drive actions, collaborations across the end-to-end enterprise. And these actions, when you drive, will result in either messages being sent or updates going into your system of records and all, if allowed, or going into a queue for approval. is the bidirectional arrow I talked to you about in the bottom. Now, the question can be, where as agents, where do you do workflows? Because now on this end-to-end workflow, this what we call as the Celonis Studio is the low code, no code, or a pro code environment in which these workflows can be created to basically drive either an agent or mapping a process, and all those can be done there. And we are very this intelligence layer can be democratized to the existing systems, chatbots, BI tools for working. I want to really emphasize again, AI agents are across everything, because when I stitch data, there can be data gaps. When I stitch data, let's just say there is a data gap on the constraint value. I don't know what the constraint is. The AI agent can be looking at what was my last 2 years, 3 years to recommend what that is. So AI is at the data level, it is at the orchestration level to route things to the right people. So that's what we talk about the AI. On the right hand side, when you talk about end to end, now there is not one person who will be responsible for everything, or there is not one person who takes care of finance, so there is a very strong security and governance which is put in place for people to navigate how organizations are built or how decision making cycles are built, so that people can have the full visibility or have the visibility which they are allowed for, but then the decisions can show the ripple effect from, remember that picture, end to end, so that they can make the right decisions.
And maybe you can wrap it up in the final slide, what Celonis is doing for supply
Correct.
chain. You see it on the left-hand side with all the applications mentioned.
Yes. So this is another picture. So what happens is, with that architecture, which I call as the cake slide, from left, you have a platform which brings all these systems and data sources into it. In the middle, we show as the connected intelligence. Think of that middle layer which I talked to you of, the intelligence layer. You're visualizing it much like the chart which was shown earlier, where your entire network and its performance is all there. You can click on any node or arch and see the KPIs or deviations or exceptions which are there in that platform. And when you do that, you are able to then, as I said, with mining, we have playbooks. So if I have an inventory shortage, you can see in the tool what are the options. Should I procure inventory? Or if there is an overstock, it will show you that if you want to do a stock transfer order, and you can actually execute actions. Now, it may be manual, automated, or things which organizations can actually configure. But last piece is important, orchestration. When you take these actions in Celonis, these are not Celonis actions alone. These are actions which will then translate into either an instruction, an update in an ERP system or other systems, or a trigger, a run in your planning systems. And those all can be strung together.
Okay, great. So we're almost out of time. So we covered a lot. So I got a question for Pushpinder. MIT research shows 95% of AI project does not deliver to expectations. What are the top key success factors that Celonis and IBM has identified? Pushpinder?
I'll say this is an kind of interesting study which has, in, like, I will say, many forums from last few years. But if I reflect on it, right, uh, it's how we define success boundaries for these programs is very crucial, right? And we have been working with many clients where, uh, if the definition of what we want to achieve with AI is very clear, these programs are getting adopted, and they are being kind of moving from pilots to MVPs to production. So we see a definitely a positive trend in this space. And I will say, if we want to think that AI will kind of completely solve all our perennial challenges in supply chain, so that definition needs to be corrected. And based on the definition, you can define success in few months to few quarters very easily with AI driven initiatives.
Manik, what is your short answer?
Yeah, I know you said short, but there are two things, right? I was at a conference where there was a lot of supply chain executives. One, this study somewhere mentions it's over a 6 month period. Most organization and customers said 6 months is too short to see value within bigger enterprises, which have so many installs of systems and all that. But more importantly, If you do not do this with the context of the physical and the digital world, and you think it's just a chatbot which can answer it, that is, you won't see the value. You will only see a value of an experience, but not true value. But if you are able to bring the way we just talked about the context, our experience has been, it is very different for people who have gone that route.
Okay, so thank you. So we're out of time. So there's an extra 30 minutes. I will be there in our virtual lounge, so you can sit down with us at table 1. So right after this. So there's more to download. So you see on the left-hand side the company IT portfolio you can download. In the middle you see a great article about Celonis, how to apply a predictable supply chain with process intelligence. And on the right-hand side you see a great link to an article about IBM, how IBM builds its first cognitive supply chain. So these are downloadable content pieces available. So for now, I would like to thank the online audience for listening in, and I would like also thank the delegates watching in the Celonis event in New York. I hope it is very insightful what we have discussed. And last but not least, Manik, thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate everybody listening to this.
And also Pushpinder, thank you for your insights.
Yep. Thank you, Martin. Thanks, Manik.
So thank you all again, and I hope to see you again in the next SCM webinar Wednesday in 2 weeks' time. And for now, I want to wrap up, and maybe I will see you in the virtual lounge. If not, I maybe see you again in another webinar. Thanks for now, and bye-bye.
Bye.